This is the story of my great-grandparents, Giuseppe Marolo and Pasqua Cristofoli. Some background information. My nonna, their child, actually passed away a couple of years ago. But when I was searching for information about Pasqua and Giuseppe's past, my mom actually came across an audio clip of my nonna telling the story or their early background before they got to Ireland. So I have somebody who can tell the story a lot more accurately than me.
She was living on a farm with her mother and father, 7 brothers, 5 died in childbirth, and she had 2 brothers who went to work, went to fight for Trieste. Nonna's father died when she was 11. She nursed her mother till she was 18, and the mother died. The Germans invaded Italy at the time, took all her stuff from the farm. She hadn't got a thing in the farm left. They took the livestock, they took the grain, they took everything, and they ate it. He gave it to the soldiers. So my mother had to go down to the village of Spilimbergo. So she went down to the village and she went to work in an osteria that was owned by a cousin. Now, the cousin's name was Cristofoli. I don't know what her Christian name was. Anyway, she went to work for the cousin. And then she went to work for a young woman who had 2 young boys, and her name was Caterina Mirolo. And she lived in the house right opposite the osteria. So my mother used to look after my father's older sister, who had Parkinson's. So naturally enough, my father fell in love with her. And before he went off to the war, he promised to marry her. So he did when he came back. Now, when he came back from the war, he was doing medicine, so he was in the medical corps in the army. Now, he had promised his mother that he would finish being a doctor. He only had 1 more year to do, and he came home and told his mother that he was fed up burying cadavers and he wasn't going to continue with medicine. And his mother said, "I'm not giving you any money. I don't care what you do, you're not going to go anywhere." So he hitchhiked to Vienna and got a job in a baker's shop and went to the College of Art in Vienna. Then he came back to Spilimbergo, married my mother, learned how to do mosaic, and he had 7 sisters. So he was the one that was working. So he used to send home money all the time. So he went working in Liverpool. And he wanted his mother to sign over the house to him. And she wouldn't. So he stopped sending money. And he stopped looking after my mother. So she was treated like a servant in the house, looking after everything and everyone. And she had Auntie Mary at the time. Anyway, she went over to Liverpool to my father. He stopped sending her money for 2 years. Went over to Liverpool to my father, who was doing Liverpool Cathedral. She hated the way the interrelation with male and female. She didn't like the way it was. There was no respect, as she said. She didn't like the city. It was grey. She didn't like it at all. So she went to the pawn shop, pawned all her jewellery, went to Thomas Cook and showed her on an
So after Pasqua sold all of her jewelry in the pawn shop, she had enough money to go back to Spilimbergo, so that's exactly what she did. And she took Mary with her. Now, Giuseppe didn't want to live without his wife or his child, so he worked fearlessly to get a new job, and luckily one came up, and in 1927 he got a job in County Cork, Ireland. So Giuseppe ended up going back to Italy to go get Pasqua and Mary, and they all shipped off for County Cork, Ireland. There, he worked in a cathedral doing mosaics, and they ended up having 4 more kids: Francis, Patty, Joe, and my nonna, Alfreda. Life was pretty normal in Ireland. They didn't really experience any racism, especially compared to what was going on in the United States at the time. However, that all changed with World War II. World War II was a very complicated time for Ireland. It was essentially a brand new country, as they only gained independence in 1921, where the country split into two, where 26 counties became democratic, the Republic of Ireland, controlled by the Irish people, yet 6 of the counties became Northern Ireland, still controlled by the British. Now, during this time, Italy joined the Axis powers in World War II, and because of that, Giuseppe was seen as a potential spy and an enemy of the state. So he was working in Dublin at the time, where they ended up moving after Cork, and he was brought in by British troops to a prison up in Belfast. And the only way that he was able to get out is that his boss actually drove all the way up to Belfast to explain to them that he isn't an enemy of the state, he isn't a spy, he's been here for years and he just works for me. And it wasn't until after World War II where the family experienced any racism. After this stage, they were called WOPs a lot, meaning without papers, referring to their illegal immigration, looking down upon them. And sometimes Joe would come home from school beat up just because he was Italian. But after the aftermath of World War II subsided, the family was generally able to integrate into Irish culture. A big part of this is because they were Catholic, and Catholicism is such a big deal in Ireland. Alfreda went on to have 9 different children, the 8th of which being my mother, and the family went on to have a happy life. So yeah, thank you for listening.